The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and betrayal. I played my mother's voicemail for the third time, her smooth, rehearsed voice filling the sterile silence. Darling, I tried to visit, but the doctor said you needed rest. I did not want to wait any longer to tell you the board has decided Madison will be the new CEO. I know this is not what you hoped for, but it is for the best. We will talk when you're feeling better. No, I'm sorry. No, I know how hard you worked. Just a decision delivered like a weather report. 12 years of building that company from nothing, and this was my reward. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen cracking. Then I cried. Ugly, heaving sobs that hurt my chest and made the monitors beep in alarm. A nurse rushed in, concerned, asking if I was in pain. Yes, I was in pain. Just not the kind she could medicate. It took 20 minutes to compose myself, to push the grief down into that locked box where I kept everything that hurt too much to feel. The doctors called my collapse exhaustion, stress-induced. My body finally surrendering to what my mind refused to accept. But lying there in that hospital bed, I realized something I had been avoiding for 12 years. I was never going to be enough for them, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many accounts I landed or divisions I built. My mother had decided long ago that I was not worth loving, and I had spent my entire adult life trying to prove her wrong. I was done proving. When I picked up the cracked phone again, my hands were steady. My voice was calm, but somewhere inside me something had died. And something else, something cold and sharp and determined, had been born. I scrolled to my contacts and found a name I had not called in months. Marcus Webb. Before becoming the family attorney, he had spent 15 years as a federal prosecutor, specializing in white-collar crime. If anyone could help me, it was him. He answered on the second ring. Rachel, I heard you were in the hospital. Are you all right? I need you to do something for me. My voice sounded strange, distant. A DNA test. Silence on the other end. Then, Rachel, what are you saying? Madison, I need to know who her real father is. That is a serious accusation. It is not an accusation. It is a suspicion, one I should have acted on years ago. I closed my eyes. Can you do it? A long pause. Rachel, what you are asking me to do is potentially illegal. Obtaining someone's DNA without their consent. If anyone finds out how we got the samples, the evidence could be inadmissible. I could lose my license. I am not planning to use it in court. Not yet. I just need to know the truth. Another pause. Then, how do you propose we get the samples? Madison uses the same coffee mug every morning at the office. Never washes it herself, leaves it for the cleaning staff. There will be saliva on the rim. And my father, I will visit him tomorrow. A water glass, a coffee cup. Getting his DNA will be easy. And if the test shows Madison is not Richard's daughter, who do you think the father is? I thought about Stephen Hayes, my father's right-hand man for over 2 decades, chief operating officer, the man who always seemed to be wherever my mother was, with perfectly reasonable explanations. I have a suspicion, but I need another sample to confirm it. Stephen Hayes. Stephen. Marcus's voice sharpened. You think Victoria and Stephen? I think a lot of things, Marcus. I just need proof. A long exhale. All right, I have a contact at a private lab. Discreet. Results in 72 hours with rush processing. But Rachel, if this blows up, you never asked me to do this. Understood. And Rachel. Whatever the results show, be careful. Your mother is not someone who loses gracefully. I almost laughed. I know I have been losing to her my whole life. I ended the call and set the phone aside. For the first time in 3 days, I had a plan. I spent the rest of that first day letting my mind wander through 12 years of memories I had been too busy to examine. I remembered my first day at Sterling Industries. 22 years old, fresh out of college with my business degree, burning with the need to prove myself. My father had shaken my hand like I was a new employee, not his daughter. Welcome to the company, he had said. Nothing more. But then I remembered something else, something I had held on to for 22 years. A Saturday when I was 12. Mother was at some charity event, Madison was at a sleepover, and Dad took me to the office. Not for work, just to show me around. This will all be yours someday. He had set his hand on my shoulder as we looked out at the Seattle skyline. You have the mind for it, the drive. I see myself in you, Rachel. It was the only time he had ever said something like that. the only time I had felt truly seen by him. I held on to that memory for 22 years, replayed it when things got hard, told myself the cold, distant man he became was not the real him. Now I wondered if Victoria had stolen that father from me piece by piece until only the shell remained. So I worked. God, how I worked. 16-hour days, weekends in the office, holidays spent analyzing quarterly reports, while the rest of the family gathered around the Christmas tree. I restructured the supply chain and saved the company $3 million in my first year. I landed the Morrison account when everyone said it was impossible. I built the international division from scratch, turning a regional business into a global presence. And through it all, I noticed things. Things I should have questioned. Things I chose to ignore because questioning them meant risking the only thing I wanted, my family's approval. 3 years ago, I stumbled across an invoice from a company called Horizon Strategic Consulting, $25,000 a month for executive advisory services. I had never heard of them. No one in operations knew what services they provided. When I brought it to Stephen, he had smiled that oily smile and said, "That is above your pay grade, Rachel. Focus on your international expansion." When I pushed harder, Mother called me into her office. Her voice was honey and venom. "Darling, I know you want to be involved in everything, but you need to trust the people who have been doing this longer than you. Stephen has everything under control. Why do not you focus on what you do best?" The next month, I was moved to international operations. As far from the financial books as possible, I had let it go. Because I thought if I just worked harder, proved myself more, eventually they would trust me. I was such a fool. And Madison, pretty delicate Madison who floated through life like a soap bubble. She dropped out of college after 2 years to find herself, in Europe, 18 months on our parents' money. When she finally returned at 24, she was given a corner office despite having no degree and no experience. I had earned my view after 5 years of proving myself. Our mother doted on her, always had. "Madison has such natural presence," she would say at dinner parties, her hand resting on Madison's shoulder. "She lights up every room." Then her eyes would slide to me and something would dim in her expression. "Rachel is so dedicated, perhaps too dedicated. Too dedicated. As if excellence was a flaw, as if building an empire was something to be pitied. But Madison was not just a passive beneficiary of Mother's favoritism. She was an active participant in my erasure. I remembered the quarterly presentation 3 years ago. I had prepared for months a new expansion strategy that could double our Asian market share. The morning of the meeting, my files were corrupted. I had to present from memory, stumbling unprepared. The board was unimpressed. Mother shook her head with that disappointed smile. A week later, Madison presented almost the exact same strategy, with polished slides and confident delivery. She received a standing ovation. I found out from an IT technician that someone had accessed my files the night before my presentation. The login credentials traced back to the executive floor, to a computer logged in with Madison's credentials. I never proved it was her. But I never forgot the way she smiled at me across the boardroom table as the applause washed over her. The smile of someone who had won a game I did not even know we were playing. The afternoon of my second day in the hospital brought my mother. She swept into the room like she was making an entrance at a fundraiser. Designer dress, perfect hair, a bouquet of white roses that probably cost more than the average person's monthly groceries. "Darling," she set the flowers on the nightstand without looking at them. "How are you feeling? I have been so worried about you." Your voicemail was very informative. Victoria Sterling sat in the chair beside my bed, crossing her legs at the ankle like she was posing for a portrait. Her expression was pure sympathy, manufactured, rehearsed, but convincing to anyone who did not know better. "I know how hard this must be for you," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "You have given so much to this company. Too much, really. I have been telling your father for years that you were working yourself too hard," she sighed. "That is why this is actually a blessing in disguise." A blessing. Madison will handle the public-facing responsibilities, the stress, the spotlight, and you can focus on what you do best. The strategy, the operations, the things you actually enjoy. She smiled warmly. "You never liked the social aspects anyway. Remember how you hated the charity galas? Now you will not have to attend them. You can work in peace without all that pressure." It sounded almost reasonable, almost caring. That was the most terrifying part. I built that company, I said quietly. The international division, the Morrison account, the restructuring that saved us from bankruptcy in 2018. And you did wonderful work. She reached out to pat my hand. Madison could never do what you do. That is why we need you exactly where you are, supporting her, guiding her from behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, there it was. You planned this, my voice was barely a whisper. Victoria's smile flickered, just for a moment. Then it was back smooth as ever. I planned nothing, darling. The board made this decision. Your father approved it. I simply facilitated. She stood straightening her dress. I understand you need time to process. That is perfectly natural, but I hope you will see that this is truly best for everyone. For the company, for the family, for you. She paused at the door. I only want what is best for you, Rachel. I always have. Then she was gone, leaving nothing but the scent of her perfume and the weight of her lies. I sat in the silence for a long time. She had not said I belonged behind the scenes. She had made it sound like she was doing me a favor, protecting me from stress, giving me freedom. But I heard what she meant. I had been hearing it my whole life. You are not enough. You will never be enough. Stop trying. Marcus arrived on the evening of my third day with a leather briefcase and an expression I could not read. Close the door, I said before he could speak. He did, then pulled the visitor's chair closer to my bed. I have updates. And Rachel, I need you to stay calm. I am calm. He studied me for a moment, then opened his briefcase. I obtained the samples, Madison's from her coffee mug at the office, Richard's from a water glass after a board meeting, and Stevens, his secretary, owed me a favor. She retrieved a coffee cup from his office. The lab, processing now, results by tomorrow evening. I exhaled slowly. What else did you find? Marcus pulled out a folder. Rachel, this goes far beyond an affair. I did some preliminary digging using my old contacts, financial records, corporate filings. What I found? He shook his head. This is a 20-year operation. He spread documents across my hospital tray. Horizon Strategic Consulting. I traced it. It is a shell company registered in Delaware in 2009. The beneficial owner is hidden behind 3 layers of LLCs, but I followed the paper trail. He pointed to a document. The ultimate owner is something called the Harrison Family Trust. Harrison, your mother's maiden name. $25,000 a month. For 15 years. The math was simple, $4.5 million. There is more, Marcus continued. A beach house in the Hamptons purchased in 2012 for $2.1 million, listed in company records as a corporate retreat facility. Except Sterling Industries has never held a single retreat there. According to property records, the only regular visitors have been your mother and Stephen Hayes. They bought themselves a vacation home with company money and expensed it as a business asset. Tax fraud on top of embezzlement. He pulled out another document. Travel records. 47 business trips to Europe over the past decade, every single one coinciding with your mother's charity work abroad. Combined cost to the company over $800,000. All personal travel disguised as business expenses. I stared at the numbers. The scope of it was staggering. Total estimated theft. Conservatively $6.5 million over 15 years. Marcus paused. But Rachel, that is not the worst part. What could be worse than $6 million? He slid another document across the tray. This is what I found buried in the legal archives. A letter of intent dated 3 months ago. Your mother has been in preliminary talks with Meridian Capital. My blood ran cold. The private equity firm, known for hostile takeovers, asset stripping, they buy companies, sell off the valuable pieces, and shut down the rest. He pointed to a clause. They were negotiating a buyout of Sterling Industries. She was going to sell the company, not just sell it, gut it. Meridian's standard playbook: acquire, strip assets, lay off 70% of the workforce, sell the pieces. Sterling Industries would cease to exist within 18 months. 3,000 employees. Sarah in accounting, who had been with the company since my father started it. James in shipping, who was putting 2 kids through college. Hundreds of people who had built their lives around this company. And Victoria walks away with, based on the share structure she has been quietly accumulating through shell companies and Madison's trust fund, somewhere between $60 and $80 million. The affair was not the betrayal. The embezzlement was not the betrayal. This was the betrayal. She is not just stealing from the company, I said slowly. She is planning to destroy it. And walk away rich, with Stephen, with Madison. Marcus looked at me. With her real family. The words hit like a physical blow. Her real family. We were never her family. We were her Mark's. There is one more thing, Marcus said quietly. And this one, Rachel, I do not know how to say this. Just say it. Your father's medical records. He has been seeing a cardiologist for the past 2 years. Stress-related heart condition. Victoria is listed as his emergency contact and medical proxy. He hesitated. There have been some anomalies in his prescriptions, medications that seem to contradict each other. I am not a doctor, but my contact at the hospital said the combination could weaken someone with an existing heart condition over time. I felt sick. Are you saying she is? I am saying we need to get your father to an independent physician soon. His voice was grim. And I am saying that whatever Victoria's endgame is, it might not just be about money. They discharged me the next afternoon. I signed the papers, collected my belongings, and called a car not to my apartment, but to Sterling Industries. The smart move was to wait for the DNA results, gather more evidence, build an airtight case. But I needed to see it. One more time. I used my keycard at the executive entrance. It still worked. They had not bothered to revoke my access yet. Why would they? In their minds, I was already irrelevant. The elevator carried me to the 40th floor, the executive suite, my territory for the past 5 years. I stepped out and froze. Through the glass walls of the corner office, I could see Madison. She was sitting at my desk with her feet up, laughing at something on her phone. Her designer shoes probably cost more than my first month's salary. And standing beside her, one hand resting casually on the back of her chair, was Stephen Hayes. They did not see me. They were too absorbed in their private moment. Madison tilted her head back and laughed, and Stephen smiled down at her with an expression I had seen 1,000 times but never understood. Pride. The pride of a father looking at his daughter. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Results are in, sending secure link now. Password is your mother's maiden name. Fitting. I stepped back into the elevator alcove out of sight and opened the encrypted file. The document loaded slowly, each second stretching like an hour. Then the words appeared on my screen. Subject A. Madison Grace Sterling. Subject B. Richard Edward Sterling. Analysis complete. No shared genetic markers detected. Probability of biological relationship 0%. I scrolled down. Subject A. Madison Grace Sterling. Subject C. Stephen Michael Hayes. Analysis complete. 17 shared genetic markers detected. Probability of biological relationship 99.97%. I read it again and again. Stephen Hayes was Madison's biological father. My mother had been sleeping with my father's most trusted employee for at least 22 years. She had passed off another man's child as my father's heir, and now she was installing that child as CEO of the company, a company she planned to sell and destroy. I looked up from my phone. Through the glass, Madison was still laughing, Stephen was still smiling, and I was still standing in the shadows, where they had always kept me. But not for much longer. I forwarded the DNA results to Marcus with 3 words, schedule the meeting. Then I looked at the office one more time, at the girl who thought she had won, at the man who thought he had gotten away with it. They had no idea what was coming. I turned and walked back to the elevator, phone clutched in my steady hand. Got you. I sat in my car in the parking garage until the sky turned dark. The DNA report glowed on my phone screen, the numbers searing themselves into my memory. 99.97%. 22 years. My mother had been living a double life for 22 years. Every family dinner, every holiday, every time she looked at my father with that practiced smile of devotion. All of it was a lie. I thought I would feel triumph, vindication. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything I thought I knew about my life. Then the hollowness filled with something else, something hot and dark and certain. My phone rang. Jenny, my roommate from business school, the only person outside the Sterling orbit who had known me for more than a decade. Rach, I heard you were in the hospital. Are you okay? Why did not you call me? I almost told her everything. Almost let the words spill out, the affair, the fraud, the DNA test, all of it. But what would I say? My mother is a monster, my sister is not my sister. My whole life is a lie. Just exhaustion, I said. I am fine, talk soon, another lie. But some truths were too heavy to share. I ended the call and started the engine. Marcus's office was a fortress of mahogany and leather. I arrived at 9 that evening, the folder of DNA results clutched against my chest like armor. Close the door, he said as I entered. I did then spread everything across his conference table. DNA reports, financial statements, the Meridian Capital letter of intent. A timeline spanning 2 decades of lies. We need to move fast, I said. She is announcing Madison as CEO tomorrow afternoon. If we wait, I know. Marcus studied the documents. I have already made calls. Emergency board meeting Thursday morning. That gives us 48 hours to prepare. 48 hours. Corporate bylaws require proper notice, but given the evidence of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, I convinced Walter Hendricks to invoke the imminent harm exception. He looked at me. Rachel, are you sure about this? Once you walk into that boardroom, there is no going back. I thought about my father, about the man who had taken me to his office when I was 12 and told me he saw himself in me, about how Victoria had stolen him from me piece by piece until he became a stranger. There was never any going back, I said. Not from the moment she sent that voicemail. What about your father he needs to know before the meeting? That was the hardest part. Telling Richard that his wife had been sleeping with his most trusted friend for over 2 decades, that the daughter he had raised and loved was not his child, that the woman he had built his life with was planning to destroy everything he had created. I will tell him tomorrow night, I said. Give him time to process before the meeting. Marcus nodded. And Madison? What do you want to do about her? I thought about the corrupted files, the stolen presentation, the smile across the boardroom table. Madison made her choices. She was not just a passive beneficiary, she actively participated in undermining me. She knew what Mother was doing, and she stayed silent because it benefited her. I looked at Marcus. She does not get to play innocent. Then we include her in the presentation. Everything, the sabotage, the stolen work, all of it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Rachel, I need you to understand something. What we are about to do, presenting illegally obtained DNA evidence, exposing your mother's affair in front of the board, this could backfire. Victoria has lawyers, good ones. She could sue for invasion of privacy, defamation. Let her sue. My voice was steady. I am not trying to win a court case. I am trying to save my father's company and expose the truth. If she wants to fight me in court afterward, I will be ready. You might lose everything. I have already lost everything that mattered. I met his eyes. My mother made sure of that. Now I am just returning the favor. I went to see my father the next evening. He was in his study, the one room in the house Victoria never entered. Walls lined with books he never read, photographs of a company he had built from nothing. He looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Rachel. He seemed surprised to see me. I heard you were in the hospital. Are you all right? I am fine. I sat across from him. Dad, I need to tell you something, and it is going to be the hardest thing you have ever heard. His expression shifted, guarded, wary. What is it? I told him everything. The affair, the DNA test, the embezzlement, the shell company, the Meridian Capital deal, the medications that might be slowly destroying his heart. He did not interrupt, did not react, just sat there, his face growing paler with each revelation until he looked like a ghost of the man he used to be. When I finished, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. 22 years, he finally whispered. With Stephen. Yes. And Madison is not. No, he closed his eyes. For a long moment, I thought he might cry. Instead, when he opened them again, I saw something I had not expected. Recognition. I knew, he said quietly. God help me, I think I always knew. What? The way they looked at each other, the trips that always coincided. Madison's smile, I used to tell myself she got it from Victoria's side of the family, but he shook his head. I told myself I was imagining things. Every time I saw them together, every time Madison laughed, and I saw nothing of myself in her face. Why did not you say anything? Because I was a coward. His voice cracked. I built this company from nothing, gave it 40 years of my life. I was terrified that if I confronted Victoria, she would destroy everything in the divorce. The scandal alone could have tanked our stock price. So I looked the other way, focused on work, pretended everything was fine. He looked at me with anguish in his eyes. And in doing so, I lost you, my real daughter, the one who actually inherited my mind, my drive, my love for this company. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I am so sorry, Rachel. I failed you. I reached across and took his hand. You were manipulated. We both were, I squeezed gently. But now we know the truth, and tomorrow everyone else will too. What do you need me to do? Come to the board meeting. When I present the evidence, I need you to stand with me. Show them that the Sterlings, the real Sterlings, will not let Victoria destroy what we built. He nodded slowly, then something hardened in his expression. She was going to sell my company, the company my father started in his garage, the company I gave my life to build. His jaw tightened. I will be there, and I will make sure she pays for every lie she ever told. The boardroom of Sterling Industries occupied the entire north side of the 40th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Seattle skyline. I arrived at 7:30 before anyone else, stood at the head of the table, my father's chair, the CEO's throne, and looked out at the city I had spent 12 years fighting for. Today that fight would end, one way or another. Board members began filtering in at 7:45. Walter Hendricks, the longest-serving member, gave me a subtle nod. Susan Park, head of the Finance Committee, offered a small smile. They had been briefed on the general nature of the emergency potential fraud requiring immediate action, but they did not know the full scope. No one did. Not yet. Victoria arrived at 7:55 with Madison in tow. My mother was dressed for victory in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Madison wore designer everything, her smile practiced and perfect. They did not notice me at first. I had positioned myself at the far end of the table away from the windows, in the shadows, where they had always kept me. Stephen Hayes slipped in behind them, positioning himself near the door. Smart, he had always been smart. Just not smart enough. My father arrived last. Richard Sterling, 60 years old, CEO of Sterling Industries, and as of last night, the most betrayed man in the room. Our eyes met. He gave me an almost imperceptible nod. At 8 o'clock exactly, Victoria called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. She began, her voice smooth as silk. I know the agenda mentioned potential fraud concerns, but I want to assure everyone that this is simply a procedural matter, nothing to worry about. She smiled at the board members, the ones she had cultivated, the ones she thought were hers. Now, before we address those concerns, I would like to proceed with our planned announcement. As you know, today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Sterling Industries, fresh leadership for a new generation. She gestured toward Madison, who rose with practiced grace. My daughter, Madison, has shown tremendous promise. Actually, I said, rising from my chair. Before we continue, there is something the board needs to see. Every head turned toward me. Victoria's smile froze. Rachel, her voice was ice. This is not the time. On the contrary. I stepped out of the shadows into the light streaming through the windows. This is exactly the time. The door opened behind me. Marcus Webb entered with a briefcase, followed by 2 Seattle PD detectives and a woman I did not recognize. This is Detective Morrison and Detective Chen from the Seattle Police Department, Marcus announced. And this is Agent Sarah Reeves from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. They are here as observers and potentially to make arrests. Victoria's face went pale. Stephen's hand moved toward his pocket, then stopped when he saw the detectives watching him. What is the meaning of this? Victoria demanded. This is harassment. I will have your license, Mrs. Sterling, Agent Reeves said calmly. I would advise you to remain silent until you have consulted with an attorney. Anything you say in this meeting may be used as evidence. The room went silent. I walked to the head of the table and opened my folder. Over the past week, I have uncovered evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and corporate manipulation spanning more than 15 years. I looked at the board members. What I am about to show you will be difficult to hear, but you deserve the truth. This company, your company, deserves the truth. I laid out the first document. Horizon Strategic Consulting, LLC, a shell company registered in Delaware in 2009. For 15 years, Sterling Industries has paid this company $25,000 per month for executive advisory services. Total payments $4.5 million. I pointed to the ownership records. Horizon Strategic Consulting is owned by the Harrison Family Trust. The beneficial owner of that trust is Victoria Sterling. Murmurs rippled through the room. Victoria stood frozen. She was paying herself, Walter Hendricks said slowly, through a fake company. That is just the beginning. I laid out more documents. A beach house in the Hamptons purchased for $2.1 million with company funds, listed as a corporate retreat facility, but used exclusively as a private vacation property. 47 business trips to Europe over the past decade, $800,000 in personal travel disguised as business expenses. Susan Park was furiously taking notes. Total estimated loss, conservatively $6.5 million. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Victoria took a step backward. This is fabricated, she stammered. Rachel has always been jealous of her sister. I have not mentioned Madison yet. I pulled out another document. 3 years ago, I prepared a presentation on Asian market expansion. The night before the board meeting, my files were corrupted. I had to present from memory and was humiliated in front of all of you. 1 week later, Madison presented the exact same strategy and received a standing ovation. I looked at Madison. She had gone pale. Records show that my files were accessed that night using Madison's login credentials. I held up the document. Madison did not just benefit from our mother's favoritism. She actively participated in sabotaging my career. I did not, Madison's voice cracked. Mother said. We will get to what Mother said. I turned back to the board. But first you need to know what this was all building toward. I laid out the Meridian Capital letter of intent. For the past 18 months, Victoria Sterling has been in secret negotiations to sell Sterling Industries to Meridian Capital, a private equity firm known for hostile takeovers and asset stripping. The room went dead silent. The proposed deal would have netted Victoria personally between $60 and $80 million. In exchange, Meridian would have acquired Sterling Industries, stripped its assets, and shut down operations within 18 months. I looked around the table. 3,000 employees would have lost their jobs. The pension fund would have been liquidated. The Sterling name would have disappeared. Walter Hendricks slammed his hand on the table. This is outrageous. Victoria, is this true? Victoria opened her mouth, closed it. For once in her life, she had nothing to say. My father stood slowly. I have one more piece of evidence, I said quietly. And this one is personal. I laid the DNA report on the table. Yesterday, I received the results of a DNA analysis comparing Madison Sterling to Richard Sterling. I looked at my father. Dad, I am sorry. I am so sorry you have to hear this here, but you deserve to know. Richard nodded. He already knew. But hearing it publicly, that was different. Madison Sterling shares no genetic markers with Richard Sterling. I let the words land like stones. She is not his biological daughter. The room exploded. Madison gasped. Walter swore under his breath. Susan grabbed the report and began reading. Victoria's composure finally shattered. You had no right, she screamed. That DNA was obtained illegally. None of this is admissible. I am not trying to convict you in a court of law, Mother. My voice was calm, cold. I am trying to show this board who you really are. And who is the biological father? Walter Hendricks asked. I turned to look at Stephen Hayes. He was edging toward the door, his face the color of ash. Stephen Michael Hayes, my father's most trusted advisor, the man who's been sleeping with Victoria Sterling for at least 22 years. Stephen made his move. He lunged for the door. The detectives intercepted him before he reached it. Stephen Hayes, you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, Detective Morrison said. You have the right to remain silent. Wait, Stephen's survival instincts kicked in. I can explain, Victoria. She masterminded everything. I was just following her lead. I can testify. Victoria spun toward him, her face contorted with disbelief and rage. You coward! You spineless, pathetic! She laughed a broken, ugly sound. I gave you everything, 22 years, a daughter. I was going to leave Richard for you. You were never going to leave Richard. Stephen's mask dropped completely. Underneath was something cold and calculating. You were going to wait for him to die and inherit everything. I was just the entertainment. That is not— I have emails, Victoria. Your emails. discussing Richard's heart condition, wondering how long it might take, researching medications and their interactions. He smiled coldly. Did you think I did not keep insurance? The room went ice cold. I felt sick. My mother had not just been planning to sell the company, she had been planning something far worse. You were going to kill him, my voice came out as a whisper. I was not going to kill anyone, Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. I was just exploring options. Victoria Sterling. Agent Reeves stepped forward. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. The rest of the Miranda rights blurred into background noise as I watched my mother's world collapse. But we were not done yet. My father stepped forward. His hands were trembling, but his voice was steady. Victoria. She turned to him. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw hope flicker in her eyes. Richard, her husband. The man she had manipulated for decades. Surely he would. I want you to look at me, he said quietly. Look at me and answer one question. Did you ever love me, or was I always just a means to an end? Victoria's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, an angle, a manipulation that could save her. She found nothing. Richard, I cared for you, in my own way. But love, she laughed bitterly. Love is for fools. I needed security, status. You had both. My father nodded slowly. Something in his eyes died. 32 years. I gave you 32 years. My name, my home, my trust. I raised another man's child as my own because I believed we were a family. His voice cracked. And you were going to destroy everything I built. Everything I sacrificed my relationship with my real daughter to build. He glanced at me, anguish in his eyes. I pushed Rachel away because I was too busy with this company to be a proper father, and you were going to sell it for scrap. It was just business. It was my life. Richard slammed his hand on the table. And you treated it like chips at a casino. He removed his wedding ring, placed it on the table. The sound it made was final. I want you out of my building. I want you out of my home. And I want you out of my life. Whatever happens next. Prison trial, whatever, you will face it alone. Victoria stared at the ring, at Richard, at the ruins of the life she had spent 32 years building. Then she turned to me. You, she hissed. You did this. No, mother. I met her gaze without flinching. You did this, 22 years ago, when you decided your family was just another asset to manage. Madison had been silent through it all, frozen, processing. Now she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. You knew. She was staring at Victoria. My whole life, every time you told me I was special, every time you said I deserved more than Rachel, you were just protecting your secret. Madison, sweetheart, I did it for you. You did it for yourself. Madison's scream echoed off the glass walls. I was never your daughter. I was your alibi, your cover story, your insurance policy. That is not true. You let me believe I was a Sterling. You let me take Rachel's job, her office, her life. And the whole time I was just... Madison looked at Stephen, then back at Victoria. I was the proof of your affair. That is all I ever was to you. Victoria reached for her. Madison, please. Madison stepped back. Do not touch me. Her voice was cold now. I do not know who you are. I do not know who I am. But I know one thing. She turned to me. Our eyes met. Rachel, I am sorry for the presentation, for everything. I told myself I was just that mother knew best, but I knew. I knew what I was doing, and I did it anyway because it was easier than standing up to her. She took a shaky breath. I do not expect you to forgive me. I would not forgive me either. Then she walked out. Victoria watched her go. Her golden child, her favorite, her weapon against me, gone. Walter Hendricks cleared his throat. I move that Victoria Sterling and Stephen Hayes be immediately suspended from all positions and duties, pending formal investigation. Their access to company systems, facilities, and funds to be revoked, effective immediately. A formal removal vote will be scheduled for next week. Seconded, Susan Park said. All in favor. Every hand in the room went up. Victoria looked around at the board members, the ones she had cultivated, the ones she thought were hers. Every single one had turned against her. The detective stepped forward to lead her away. As she passed me, she stopped. "You think you have won," she whispered. "But you are just like me, Rachel. Cold, calculating, willing to destroy your own family to get what you want." I leaned close. "The difference between us, Mother, is that I am protecting my family. You were always just protecting yourself." The detectives escorted her out. I watched her go, this woman who had given birth to me, who had spent 34 years making me feel worthless, who had been planning to destroy everything and everyone I loved. I felt nothing. No, that was not true. I felt something. Relief, freedom, like a weight I had carried my entire life had finally been lifted. I turned back to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a company to save." I walked to the head of the table, to my father's chair, to the CEO's throne, and sat down. "I suggest we get started." The security guards did not take Victoria and Stephen out the back way. I had not asked for this, but I did not stop it either. They walked them through the main floor, past the cubicles where assistants they had belittled for years sat watching, past the break room where employees gathered, phones already recording, past the reception desk where the woman Victoria had once called "that temp girl" stood with her arms crossed and a satisfied smile. Someone started clapping, then another, then the whole floor. Not for Victoria and Stephen, for me. I stood at the glass railing of the executive level, looking down at the atrium below. Victoria looked up and saw me watching. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just stood there in the light where she had told me I did not belong. She looked away first. The elevator doors closed. And just like that, the woman who had ruled this company's social hierarchy for 3 decades was gone. Within an hour, the video was everywhere. Victoria's carefully curated public image, the philanthropist, the society wife, the devoted mother, was trending for all the wrong reasons. She had spent 30 years building that image. It took 30 minutes to destroy it. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in consequence. Victoria's assets were frozen pending investigation. The Hamptons beach house was seized as evidence of fraud. Her country club membership was revoked. The charity boards she had sat on for decades quietly removed her name from their websites. Friends who had kissed her cheek at galas stopped returning her calls. She was photographed leaving the federal courthouse in handcuffs. Her designer suit wrinkled, her perfect hair disheveled. "Sterling socialite faces federal charges," the headline screamed. "Affair fraud and a daughter's revenge." Stephen fared no better. His wife, yes, he had been married for 18 years, with 2 sons in college, filed for divorce within 48 hours of his arrest. His assets were frozen separately. The colleagues who had called him sir for 20 years lined up to testify against him in exchange for immunity. The full scope of Victoria's plan emerged through the investigation. The Meridian deal would have stripped Sterling Industries of its most valuable divisions, laid off 2,800 employees, and eliminated the pension fund that longtime workers depended on. Victoria had negotiated a personal bonus of $15 million for facilitating the transaction. The share accumulation scheme was more sophisticated than we had initially realized. Through her web of shell companies' trusts in Madison's name and manipulated stock options, Victoria had been building toward majority control for over a decade. If she had succeeded, she could have forced the sale without Richard's approval. And then there were the medical records. An independent physician reviewed my father's prescriptions and found dangerous drug interactions that should never have been approved. The cardiologist who had been treating him, a Dr. Victoria had personally recommended, lost his license 6 months later. The evidence was circumstantial, but the implication was clear enough for the prosecutors. They added attempted murder to the list of charges. My phone buzzed with updates from Marcus throughout the following months. Federal grand jury indicted both. 17 counts wire fraud, 12 counts embezzlement, tax evasion, money laundering, attempted murder for Victoria. And then 4 months later, Stephen took a plea deal, 12 years testimony against Victoria in exchange for reduced sentence. The man my mother had loved for 22 years had risked everything for, had an illegitimate child, with he testified against her for 5 hours. Exposed every secret, every lie, every plan. When the verdict came, I was sitting in the CEO office that was now officially mine. Guilty, all counts. Victoria Sterling sentenced to 25 years to life federal prison. No parole eligibility for 20 years. She would be 78 years old when she got out. If she got out, 22 years. She had spent 22 years building her empire of lies. It took 22 weeks to tear it all down. Madison's fate was its own kind of justice. Richard's lawyers made it clear, as she was not biologically his child, she had no claim to the Sterling estate or trust funds. 22 years of being the heir apparent, and she would inherit nothing. The company removed her from all positions. The business world talks, and within weeks, everyone knew. Competitors who might have hired her declined. Doors that had always opened for the Sterling name now slammed shut. She came to see me once about a month after the trial. "Can we talk?" I did not invite her to sit. She stood in my office doorway, arms wrapped around herself like a child seeking comfort she knew she did not deserve. "I do not expect forgiveness," she said quietly. "I just wanted you to know I did not know about the affair, about Stephen being my father, about any of the financial stuff. Mother kept me in the dark about all of it. But you knew about the presentation, the sabotage." She nodded slowly. "Mother said it was for the good of the company, that you were not ready for leadership, that I was protecting you from embarrassment." She laughed bitterly. I believed her because it was easier than questioning her, because questioning her meant losing everything I had. "Everything you had was stolen from me." "I know." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "And I know sorry does not fix any of it. I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be different. Better, I got a job at a nonprofit in Portland. Small salary, tiny apartment. It is not much, but it is mine. I earned it. I studied the woman who had been my sister for 22 years, who was not my sister at all, who had been my competitor without me knowing my replacement being groomed in plain sight. "You have a long way to go," I said finally. "I know. But the fact that you are here saying this instead of blaming everyone else like Mother would—" I paused. "It is a start." She nodded, wiped her tears, and walked out of my office. I never saw her again. My father found me a week later sitting in the CEO office as the sun set over Seattle. "May I?" I nodded. He sat in the chair across from my desk. "The doctors say my heart is recovering," he said. "Now that I am on the right medications, they think I will be fine." "I am glad." He was quiet for a moment. "I have been thinking about that Saturday, when you were 12, when I took you to the office and told you this would all be yours someday. I remember. I meant it, you know, every word, but then Victoria got in my ear, told me you needed space to develop on your own, that hovering over you would stunt your growth, that Madison needed more attention because she was the sensitive one." He shook his head. "I listened to her, I pulled away from you, and I have regretted it every day since. You could not have known. I should have known." He met my eyes. "You were my daughter, my real daughter. I should have fought harder to stay connected to you. Instead, I let her push us apart." He reached across the desk and took my hand. "I am sorry, Rachel, for all of it." I squeezed back. "We have time now," I said, "to rebuild, to be the family we should have been." He nodded slowly, then attempted a smile. "I am retiring next month. For real, this time. The company is in good hands." He looked at me with pride. Real, genuine pride. "The best hands." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Rachel, yes. Your mother was wrong about one thing." He looked at me with something I had not seen in years. "Love. You were never behind the scenes. You were always the one holding everything together, the only one who saw the whole picture." He left and I sat alone in the office that was now mine. The city lights were beginning to flicker on as evening settled over Seattle. I watched them spread across the skyline, thousands of tiny lights, in thousands of windows, each one representing someone else's story. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Final sentencing confirmed. Victoria 25 to life. Stephen 12 years. It is really over." I set the phone down and looked at my reflection in the darkened window. 34 years old. CEO of Sterling Industries. Survivor of a family that had tried to destroy me. For 12 years, I thought I needed their approval to know my worth. I worked myself into a hospital, trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. I ignored the signs, made excuses, told myself that if I just tried harder, they would finally see me. It took losing everything, my health, my position, my illusions, to realize the truth. I was never behind the scenes. I was the only one who saw the whole picture. And now finally everyone else could see it too. I turned away from the window and looked at the stack of reports on my desk. 3,000 employees depending on me, a company to rebuild, a legacy to protect. I smiled. Time to get to work.
Bây giờ như này em ngồi